Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and this is 15 multiverse horror movies that will definitely blow your mind. It is incredibly tough to bound horror flicks to a particular type, and there have been different expressions of horror that caught the eyes of the audience. One such horror genre is the multiverse horror movies, or the ones that deal with stuff from another dimension or an alternate reality. The very concept is quite terrifying because it is far more complicated than our minds can even comprehend. The human mind has a natural fear of the unknown, and what can possibly be more unexpected than the mysterious elements of multiverse horror? Many of the following movies explore complicated timelines, and in some cases, they have a bizarre narrative that looks into how a gateway from our world can lead to alternate dimensions. In this video, we have clubbed together some of the finest multiverse horror flicks to ever be made. In some cases, it's tough to distinguish between the subgenres of these movies, and so we've grouped them together as multiverse horror movies. Stories that are twisted enough to numb your thinking. Before we get into today's explanation, however, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, let's begin. The Cloverfield Paradox, 2018. The story is premised in the near future, where the natural resources of Earth are depleting at an alarming rate. With the impending energy crisis all set to plunge things into a new dark era of destruction, the only hope lies with a group of scientists at the Cloverfield station in space. They will be testing on the mysterious particle accelerator that is believed to be able to produce infinite amounts of energy. However, if things go wrong, it will not only damage the station, but also open a portal to another dimension that has a parallel Earth. The accelerator could damage the fabric of reality beyond repair, and the crew at the Cloverfield station must be prepared for the worst in such cases. When the experiment does go wrong, and a new dimension is opened up, can the scientists find a way to return to their own dimension?
What is that?
The Cloverfield Paradox is a sequel to the original found footage hit, but this movie has very little to do with its predecessor. In fact, until the end of the movie, it has almost nothing to do with the franchise. This sci-fi horror flick could have been way better than how it turned out to be. However, there is no taking away from the unique concept, and the impressive special effects as well. In spite of the predictable storyline and a few annoyingly flawed situations, the movie holds its own, simply because of its conceptual brilliance. It is a pretty solid danger in space movie, and the narrative quickly gets to the point. After things start going wrong, the level of danger escalates fast enough to keep you interested. The multinational cast does a fine job with the acting department, and you will find some familiar faces delivering impressive performances. You will even find some touching drama in the mix of things, and while it may not be the most powerful or memorable, it does make a strong momentary impact. The climactic moments of this film, though, feel a bit forced, and it was certainly a tad too cheesy in our liking. But overall, the film is still worth a one-time watch, just for the uniqueness of the idea. Coherence, 2013. It was supposed to be a happy reunion for 8 friends who showed up for a dinner party in North Carolina. It was also the night which was supposed to mark the passing of the Miller's Comet. After a sudden power outage across the entire neighborhood, things start going terribly wrong. The group ventured outside to investigate one particular house that seems to have lights during the blackout. They soon discover a strange world, where a troubling chain of reality-bending events takes them by surprise. They find out that alternate versions of themselves exist as well, in this night of astronomical anomaly. Is there a way to go back to normal? We have all heard about low-budget flicks outdoing themselves, but what if we told you that Coherence was made with a mere budget of $50,000? They filmed within 5 nights in a single location, and even the dialogue was largely improvised. The sets had only 5 crew members, and the director used his own house to complete the filming. Despite such constraints, the movie is surprisingly engaging and quite tense. The idea was near perfect, and it is tough to find flaws even if you pull at the edges. The narrative was satisfyingly constructed, and the only complaints some people have are about the camera work. Cut them some slack, guys. We weren't exactly filming with Warner Brothers. If you choose to ignore some of the amateur aspects of the movie, such as the lighting and the colors, you will find a gem on your hands. The unknown cast punches way above their weight, and the acting performances are rather impressive. Coherence is a cleverly made horror drama. and the interesting anchoring in the scientific jargon will introduce the sci-fi fans as well. One of the best things about this movie is that it never gets too predictable. At no point whatsoever can you guess the events that are about to happen next, and the options are almost endless. However, the movie does fall short of greatness because the makers could have done a lot more with such a terrific concept. But even then, Coherence is a must-watch for all the horror sci-fi fans out there, and you must prepare yourselves to get your minds blown. The Lake, 1998. Jackie Ivers works as a nurse in Los Angeles, and she returns to her home in the small town of San Vincent. She comes back to care for her dying father, but a strange surprise awaits her in her hometown. Jackie discovers that everyone in this town, from her friends to her family, seems to have changed quite a bit. They are all very different personalities than what she knew, and Jackie finds out that these behavior changes occur when they go to the town's lake. The narrative soon progresses into an unbelievable territory when we are enlightened about the presence of an alternate world. In this duplicate world, the pollution levels have become so extreme that the ozone layer is completely gone. People from the duplicate Earth now have plans to take over Jackie's Earth in order to survive, and the entrance portal to this alternate world is present in the lake. The Lake proves once again that you don't need star power to put together an amazing movie. Here, the story is the real winner, and the remarkably unsettling atmosphere is sure to get to you. The pacing is stable enough for you to follow, and it might be quite a surprise to watch the alluring and voluptuous Yasmin Bleeth take up the role of an intelligent nurse. It is true that, as a viewer, you will always be a few steps ahead of the script, but that doesn't hurt the experience. There are a few very well staged, tense sequences that will leave the audience in shock. The presentation is not very scary, but the idea is to keep the viewers engaged and confused. The concept of invading strangers from an alternate world is intriguing enough, and the idea could have been made into a very interesting and extended TV series. Does the terrific idea fall apart towards the end? Well, the climax certainly is a bit of a letdown, but we won't go so far enough to say that it was disastrous. A majority of the narrative is rather captivating, and you will not regret witnessing these bizarre turn of events in the quaint little town of San Vincent. The Void, 2016. Sheriff Deputy Danny Carter was about to have another one of those uneventful nights when things changed all of a sudden. He noticed a terribly injured man who was drenched in blood crawling in the middle of the road. Carter immediately takes him to a nearby hospital, which seems to be run by a stripped-down overnight staff, and the resources are rather limited. Soon, a startling discovery shocks those inside the hospital. Cloaked disciples of an ancient evil cult encircle the place in large numbers, and there seems to be no easy escape from the hospital. To make matters worse, Carter soon realizes that there are some unspeakable horrors inside the hospital as well. The patients, and even some members of the staff, start to turn ravenously insane, and Carter helplessly tries to lead the survivors into the depths of the hospital. It seems like the darkest elements of a horrible dimension await them all, and there's no escaping this black void of the cosmos. This low-budget, crowd-funded Canadian horror flick is a fitting tribute to the legacy of John Carpenter. In many ways, the movie pays homage to the legendary filmmaker, and The Void does a great job in doing just that. To start the proceedings, such a siege film never fails to grab the attention of the viewers. The primary characters are all holed up in an isolated hospital, with terrible things happening all around them, presenting ominous signs. From there, it is simply a descent into madness, as cult members and terrifying monsters make their presence felt. The budgetary constraints force them to cut a few corners, but nothing really compromises with the quality of the movie. The acting is rock solid, even with the absence of any big names. We loved the use of practical effects in this film, because that really brings back the 80s vibe that we all admire. The effects are grotesque and convincing, and we were particularly impressed by the gnarly Lovecraftian bent of the plot. In short, The Void is a wonderful modern horror film that takes you back to the glorious past, and this entertaining horror drama will be perfect for your next movie night. Event Horizon, 1997. The plot is premised in the future, and the year is 2047. It has been 7 years since a spaceship called the Event Horizon disappeared under mysterious circumstances. It was sent to explore the outer limits of the solar system, but it wasn't heard of ever since. Now, it has reappeared all of a sudden, and a group of astronauts are sent on a rescue mission. Once they board the spacecraft, they discover to their horror that Event Horizon probably brought something back with it from beyond space. This entity is an unspeakable evil, and the longer the rescue crew spends on the spaceship, the more they realize that someone, or rather something, is simply toying with them. What has become of the Event Horizon? Just watch as the mysteries unfold. Event Horizon is a dark and rather brave movie that has a disturbing mix of horror and sci-fi. The director does a splendid job of making the viewers uneasy right from the onset, and even with some minor flaws in the plot, he went through with this ambitious movie. The director, Paul W.S. Anderson, still regrets not handling the cuts too well. The studio deemed the initial cut to be a bit too violent and asked him to cut the movie down by 30 minutes. He later revealed that he did not have the time for a proper re-edit and ended up cutting out 10 minutes too much. We've all been wondering what the original uncut version looked like, because unfortunately, that's not available any longer. It is normal to compare this movie with some other Anderson films, like Resident Evil and Mortal Kombat, and you will get a similarity in the designs and costumes. The entire narrative is dark, and the atmospheric build-up is supported by some enthusiastic performers, from the likes of Sam Neill, Lawrence Fishburne, and Kathleen Quinlan. Another major positive for this movie are the special effects, and visually, this film is delightful. There have been a few fans who criticized the graphic violence, but knowing that the gorier bits were cut out, we can only imagine the bloodied original version. This is not your typical space horror flick, and simply for the uniqueness of the whole thing, Event Horizon is worth being right up there on your watch list. 1408, 2007. Mike Enslin is a cynical and skeptical writer who specializes in debunking paranormal occurrences. He goes around evaluating some of the supernatural events in hotels, graveyards, and other haunted places, and he usually finds out some rational reason behind the phenomena. For his latest book, however, he has traveled to New York, and he intends to spend the night at the fabled room 1408 in the Dolphin Hotel. This room has been notorious for some unexplained events in the past, and it is permanently unavailable for the guests. The manager is reluctant to permit Mike's stay in the room because in the last few decades, over 50 guests have died in the cursed room. But Mike is determined, and he finally gets to check into the room. It doesn't take long before he finds out that once someone checks in, there is no way for them to check out. Well, alive anyway. He experiences a secret realm of unexplained occurrences and surreal instances, which soon make it tough to comprehend the reality. Adaptation of a Stephen King novel is easier said than done. 1408, however, is up to the task and offers a perfectly spooky narrative that will keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time. John Cusack plays the role of the cynical writer, and he has done a fabulous job of capturing the journey of the character. He goes through various emotions in the course of the narrative, and he nails them all. Samuel L. Jackson also does a terrific job in his impactful role. This is essentially a typical haunted house movie, but the surprises spring up every now and then to keep things interesting. There are some jump-in-your-seat moments. The creepiest part begins when Mike struggles to deal with his demons in the middle of paranormal events. Slowly but steadily, the terror escalates, and the man is driven to the point where he loses his will to live. While the movie is nothing short of brilliant, the ending could have been left differently. Maybe an open-ended conclusion, leaving it for the viewer, could have been a fun way to end things. But we digress. 1408 is still one of the few truly intriguing modern haunted house stories that promise a night of terror for the viewer. The Mist, 2007. The Drayton family, David, Steph, and their son Billy, live a quiet life in a small Maine town. Their peaceful life, though, is soon disturbed by a violent storm when it hits the area. The following morning, a strange mist is observed descending upon the town. David and his son Billy accompany their neighbor Brent Norton and head up to the nearby town to get supplies. However, the trip soon turns south after they are locked up inside a grocery store with many other people. To make matters worse, they discover that the mist hides something terrifying within it. Some interdimensional creatures have found their way into the earth after a military experiment went wrong, and these creatures are set loose on the townsmen. The frantic and frightened shoppers fight for survival, and we get to witness the real monsters that secretly hides within humans. The apocalyptic disaster keeps getting interesting, and the ending will definitely leave you mortified. Stephen King declared that even he was genuinely spooked by this adaptation of his novella. So, you know that the director, Frank Darabont, wasn't just messing around with his interesting story. This movie captures the true essence of Stephen King's novels, his ability of describing fear in a unique manner. This film is visually stunning, and the makers simply hit it out of the park with the special effects. The narrative conceals some unthinkable violence, and some of the scenes are certainly not for the faint-hearted. Much of the focus is actually on the human nature of making an awful situation worse, with their quirks and their selfishness. There are some genuinely likable characters alongside some unpleasant ones. Among the cast, Marcia Gay Harden is the most impressive, and the likes of Thomas Jane have come together to deliver some powerful performances. The creatures look stunning, and for a few moments, you will really believe that these monstrosities are living, breathing creations. They changed the ending because the climax of the original story might not have translated well on screen, but this can be debatable. All we can say is that this dark and claustrophobic modern monster flick is effective, gripping, and well worth your time. The Butterfly Effect, 2004. Evan grows up in a small town, and as a child, he often suffered from blackouts. During these blackouts, he would be in one place one minute, and in another place the next minute. He would have no memory of how he got there, and these memory blackouts are not believed by his friends or even his mother. Everyone thinks that Evan simply does these gimmicks to get out of trouble, but as he grows up, he finds out the real mystery of the blackouts. While reading an old journal, he tried to remember some of the things from his past, and all of a sudden, a flashback hits him hard. He realizes that the blackouts were actually empty spaces of time that he had to fill up later in his life. He tried to undo the pleasant bits of his past, but every time he went back in time, things actually became worse in his present. Will the supernatural way to alter his life prove to be successful? It is not a cakewalk to get time travel movies right, unless the element of time travel is kept really simple, such as in movies like Terminator and Time Cop. Things have to be watertight for the audience to follow. The Butterfly Effect traverses the tough waters of time travel quite elegantly, and there aren't too many logical inconsistencies to point at. The plot is uncomplicated, and the events are presented in chronological order to make sure that you are not confused. Ashton Kutcher is impressive in the lead role, and while this might not be his finest performance, he does bring an element of likability on screen. The premise is intriguing, and the movie ensures that things don't get too convoluted either. This world of multiverse, split future events, chaos theory, and other such complicated concepts are handled with ease, and all these bring you an intelligent time travel story. The directors are not afraid to add despair and some shocking moments that make it rather unsettling. But this raw and obscure nature of the movie adds to the appeal. The climax will blow your mind or question your existence, but we can guarantee that you will definitely appreciate the simplicity of the whole thing. You can take our word for it. You will not find too many supernatural thrillers that packs deeply thought-provoking themes like this one.
Thank God. No! Help us! Help us!
Triangle, 2009. Jess is a waitress and a single mom, and she's been bogged down by life as of late. In order to blow off some steam, she decides to be part of a sailboat trip with her friends. However, even as they set sail on a yacht, she cannot shake off some negative feelings inside her regarding the trip. It soon turns out that her sixth sense was giving the right warnings all along when they were caught up in a violent storm. A massive wave capsizes the yacht, and helplessly and the unforgiving, Jess and the other survivors hop on what looks like an abandoned cruise ship. They soon find themselves trapped in the ship's maze-like corridors, and it seems like they're not alone. Meanwhile, Jess experiences some strange deja vu moments, and she gets the feeling of being chased by an invisible killer. Is her sixth sense right yet again? And will she manage to get back to safety? What if you could live your life over and over again? Would you change anything about it, even after knowing that the outcome is a disaster? Triangle brings us yet another time-twisted alternate reality complexity, but believe us, this gem of a movie has been handled by capable hands. It is a tragedy that such a quality project slipped under the radar, and this cleverly constructed film deserves a lot more appreciation. The exciting storyline is supported by the fantastic lead performance from the talented Melissa George. She is ably supported by Liam Hemsworth and the other actors, who ensure that all the characters look convincing. The direction by Christopher Smith is masterful, and after his 2006 film Severance, he seems to be progressing in the right direction. While almost everything works for this well-made movie, there are a few things that could have been different. For instance, the runtime is a bit too long, and the narrative does take some time to pick up the pace. If you are watching this for the first time, you are sure to come away completely perplexed at the turn of events. But our verdict is to go and enjoy this sly and surprisingly horror fantasy thriller, because such reality-bending narratives come few and far between. The Broken, 2008. Gina McVie is a famous radiologist in London, and she has a strange experience the day after throwing a birthday party for her father. While she is passing through a busy street, she believes to have seen herself drive past her in her own car. She is shocked by the strange event, and she chooses to follow this mysterious woman right up to her apartment. While looking through the apartment, she finds a picture of herself and her father, but while driving back from the apartment, she meets with an accident. Now, she loses a part of her memory, and her awareness drops from the solid reality into a world that haunts her more than her worst nightmares. Gina is determined to figure out the reasons behind this unexplained string of events, and eventually, it unravels a dark reality, with the only clue being a broken mirror. You might be wondering about the originality of the storyline, and the whole thing might be sounding a bit on similar lines as the invasion of the Body Snatchers. Well, you aren't wrong about it, because The Broken is essentially a repeat of that story in London. It is a slow-paced and stylish movie that attempts to recreate the horror classic in its own way. Unfortunately, the director and writer, Sam Ellis, doesn't succeed in entertaining as much as the source material. The movie begins strongly, and there are a few shocking moments to make you take notice. The real problem here lies in the overall mediocrity, which essentially comes from the fact that people have heard this story before. The actors, however, try really hard to save the day. Lena Headey leads the pack with a convincing performance, but that's not enough to lift the quality. One of the main issues with The Broken is that it doesn't really provide answers for all the questions that pop up. The predictable nature of the plot is also quite irritating because halfway down the line, you've figured most of it out already. This flawed horror drama is watchable only for the stylish presentation and the rare line of narrative that explores some uncharted territories. Pandorum, 2009. Pandorum is set in an ultra-futuristic world, and the year is 2174. The spaceship Elysium is sent out as the last hope for mankind after the natural resources on Earth are nearly exhausted. The voyage is set to be incredibly long and tiring, and thus the crew members have been divided into several teams. They travel in hypersleep and keep rotating their shifts to take care of the journey. During the course of their journey, two of the crew members find themselves awakened under mysterious circumstances. They wake up somewhat disoriented and in a state of amnesia. Slowly, some of the deadly secrets about the spacecraft are revealed. They realize that some threatening life form is present in the spacecraft, and they have to team up to find a chance of surviving. We did not go in with the highest expectations, but we were pleasantly surprised by Pandorum. The story might not be the most original one you've ever heard, but the execution is definitely spot on. In fact, we even appreciated some of the other aspects of the film, such as character development and the intriguing nature of the narrative that keeps you guessing. The script is credible enough to hit hard with the paranoia of claustrophobia, and the music is adequately atmospheric. The slow pacing of the film can get tedious at times, but patience will be awarded with an unforgettable climax. The final twist is impossible to predict, and this movie is a remarkable space horror flick that captures the true fear of the unknown. It was believed that Pandorum would be the first film in a trilogy, but as of now, it looks highly unlikely that the sequels will ever be made after the disappointing box office collections. It's unfortunate that such a clever idea did not amount to commercial success. The very thoughts of astronauts stuck in space with carnivorous mutants after them is intriguing enough for a classic sci-fi horror. The effects are gorgeous, and maybe, just maybe, this film might end up being an underrated classic in the long run. The Jacket, 2005. Jack Starks was a Gulf War veteran who nearly died in battle. He returned with a serious injury and headed back to his native Vermont, recovering from his injuries. He still had some bouts of amnesia, but life was about to get way worse for him. It all started after he was picked up by a stranger while hitchhiking, and a cop was murdered. Jack was accused of the murder because he was framed perfectly by the real killer. The war veteran is accidentally sent to a mental institution for the insane criminals. A disreputable doctor makes him the subject of his experiments, and he is restrained in a jacket-like device that locks him away. While he helplessly suffers from the inhuman treatment, he has some flashbacks and visions of his future, and even his death. Will he manage to come out of this race against time? What if your future lay hidden in your past? The Jacket is quite possibly one of the most underrated time travel dramas, with a surprisingly rewarding storyline. You will find shades of the butterfly effect, and the real twists come when you least expect them to. It is a rather unusual film, and the interesting idea has been handled with care. Adrian Brody has synthesized the best of his acting skills to perfect this role, and others like Chris Christopherson and Keira Knightley ensure that the acting performances are one of the main strengths of this film. The makers could have introduced more tension in the narrative, but the dark themes of the narrative don't leave much else to complain about. The director did get a lot of flack for making it a bit too similar to Jacob's Ladder, but the intriguing movie does step a few feet in the other direction as well. The conclusion, for instance, is open to interpretations, and this time travel epic is unforgettable if you ignore some of the plot holes. If you have a weak stomach or claustrophobia, this hard-hitting film is definitely not meant for you.
Anybody in there? Anybody home?
Jacob's Ladder, 1990. Jacob Singer is a Vietnam War veteran whose life was taken a tragic turn following his return from the war. After being seriously injured, he works as a postal worker and is divorced from his wife Sarah. He lives with his colleague Jezebel in a small Brooklyn apartment, and he often mourns the loss of his son, who died in an accident. Jacob is also plagued by some disturbing hallucinations, flashbacks, and all these point to some heinous conspiracy that he has been a victim of. Sometimes it blurs the line between illusions and reality for him, and his new partner tries her best to help him keep a grip on his sanity. After he discovers the true extent of the conspiracies against him, life will never be the same again. What an anguishing and breathtaking psychological thriller this movie proved to be. There cannot possibly be better accounting for the nightmarish images, and even though the film prioritizes style over substance, there is not a step to be taken in the wrong direction. Adrian Lyne has hit a home run with his powerful and compelling narrative, and even when the going gets slower in parts, you can still appreciate the thrill of the plot. If you are a horror film fan and you are looking for some particularly spooky moments instead of the usual bloody carnage, this movie will please you to no end. The most disturbing sequences in the movie are mostly the ones where the protagonist battles his inner demons. The film has a very depressing and downbeat feel around it, and some of the scenes, such as the one where the protagonist gets robbed by a man dressed as Santa, stand out for their irony. The final reveal is quite unexpected, and it suddenly pulls the plug on you. Tim Robbins impresses with yet another top-notch performance, and the likes of Elizabeth Pena and Danny Aiello provide good support as well. The special effects in this film was filmed live, and there was no post-production. Overall, Jacob's Ladder is an experience like no other, where you have to face your own nightmares, but watch it only if you can handle the trauma. From Beyond, 1986. A group of scientists has accomplished the unthinkable. They have created a device called the resonator, which can simulate the sixth sense using the pineal gland. This allows those in the vicinity to see beyond the normal perceptible reality. After activating the device, one of the scientists sees unknown creatures flying in the air, but the experiment soon goes completely out of control. One of the members of the group is beheaded, and it soon dawns on everyone that the harnessed power of the resonator can cause great damage. It somehow unlocks the doorway to an otherworldly reality of the fourth dimension. And in this nightmarish realm, things aren't as rosy as the real world. The dark entities of this world cannot wait to step into our world, and you'll have to wait and watch to see if they can be driven back. There are two schools of thought, one that regards From Beyond as a well-thought-of sci-fi classic, and the other that treats this as a merely entertaining B-movie. Whatever you might believe in, there is no denying the fun factor associated with this narrative. This was the director Stuart Gordon's follow-up to Reanimator. And while From Beyond is no match for the latter, it is still very enjoyable and comes with a nice twist. The movie acts as a tribute to the old monster flicks, and you get a generous dose of blood, slime, and goo. It has been adapted from a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, so you can be assured that there's no shortage of monster mayhem in this movie. The special effects are downright amazing, especially if you take into account the low budget. The effects are never laughable, and they are so much fun to watch that you will be left wondering how they accomplished all this with such limited resources. The film is also helped by a capable cast, and while this may not be some Oscar-worthy sci-fi drama, it certainly can make for a wonderful movie night with a couple of beers. Dagon, 2001. This movie is based on a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, and you will be introduced to a world of monstrosities that you cannot imagine in your worst nightmares. It all begins after a boating accident takes place off the coast of Spain. Paul Marsh, a young man, is caught up in the storm, and he ends up ashore along with his girlfriend Barbara. They find their way into a local fishing village looking for help, but something doesn't quite seem right. Slowly, as night falls, people around them start disappearing, and some inhuman things start appearing. Paul soon realizes that the entire town is pursuing him, and the dark secret of this mysterious town is that they worship Dagon, the ancient monstrous god of the sea. Dagon's unholy half-human offspring are on the loose, and Paul and Barbara are in deep trouble with nowhere to run. Some fans hail Dagon as one of the best works of Stuart Gordon, and they aren't exaggerating too much. Dagon is loosely adapted from the story Shadow over Innsmouth, but a lot has been changed to suit the demands of a movie. This might irk the Lovecraft fans out there, but the movie does make great use of Lovecraftian themes and ideas. Dagon promises a gruesome adventure and an action-packed journey complete with strange monsters. The makers get the setting right, and there couldn't have been a better backdrop for the movie. However, the movie doesn't come without a few flaws here and there. For example, a lot more could have been done with the creepy and weird inhabitants of the town. They end up being more laughable than a menace. But the flaws are still well concealed by the brilliant script, and the visual impact of the movie is another strong point. Be prepared for some strong scenes of gore and the creature effects in this film that will not leave a bad taste in your mouth. All in all, it is always rewarding to check out a superior Lovecraft adaptation, and this one will certainly not disappoint you. And with that, we end today's video. These are just some of our picks for the horror movies that thrive in the multiverse. What are some of your favorites? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like our video, and of course, subscribe if you haven't already. For Marvelous Videos, I'm Rylan. Till next time, have a good one, be safe, and thanks for watching.